Welcome to Modern Morality. My name is Mikey, and I'm joined here by John.
Hello, everyone.
And Johnny.
Hello.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoy. Alrighty, welcome back to Modern Morality. I'm joined today by Johnny, John, and today we have a very special guest. He's a defense investigator, Josh. Say hello to everybody.
Hey, how are y'all?
Alrighty, so this is part 2 with our conversation with Josh. We hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Well, I've heard arguments, and I try to listen to a lot of podcasts, listen to a lot of people expressing their opinions. There's a good argument to be had for the privatization of law enforcement. Because right now you have it's a monopolistic system. You've got a city department who the chief executive, the chief of police for that department is accountable to the mayor and the city council. You have the constitutional office of sheriff.
And most of those people you just named are not from law enforcement backgrounds.
Almost none of them. Very few. Then you look at a constitutional office like sheriff, who every 4 years has to get the approval and permission to continue from the people he serves. But
so for 4 years he's politicking.
Pretty much. I mean, that's it. That's the nature of the beast, though. At this point in time, everybody.
Well, the chief of police doing the same thing. He's politicking only to a shorter.
That's it.
Shorter
His constituency is much smaller.
I think my statement actually holds true there. I think a lot of the county sheriffs are not even strong law enforcement backgrounds.
I know of.
You don't have to be in law enforcement at all.
Yeah, to
Nope.
be sheriff.
No,
To be a sheriff.
there is a process after election to get post certification. Peace officer standards and training council oversees that. But yeah, I mean, but you have a sheriff's office is accountable to the people who they represent. Police department less so. If you keep the city the city manager, the mayor, and the councilman happy, you got the tenure. But the argument I've heard for privatization is people pick who handles their law enforcement, and if you're not satisfied with the job that they're doing, then you fire them and you go to the next company. You go to somebody else.
Right.
And it's a series of contracts between them. Now we're getting way out in the.
But you're still just talking about the execution of all this.
That's
right?
it. That's exactly right.
Because they're enforcing, whether they're private or not, the same laws made by the same people.
Exactly.
I'd like to throw this out. I don't know how valid it is, but do you think that part of the reason why we have to have so many law enforcement officers is because the judicial system is kind of failing us? That the same people show up committing crimes time after time, and you have to have somebody out there to round them up?
Well, I'm not in law enforcement, and Josh can certainly have a different opinion here, but I would say that we're disheartening our law enforcement when they see that happen.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You take the motivation away from even the good ones you've hired.
Right.
Yeah, they say, I'm spinning my wheels here.
Right. What's the point?
What's the point?
Well, my thought is, and my brain immediately went to Andy Griffith. Well, what about the small town police departments where you know everybody and the repeat offenders? Like Andy Griffith, I think his name was Otis, the drunk. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like every time he was, every episode except for maybe 2, he was always slurring his words. He immediately put himself in his own cell. He went out by himself.
Victimless crime.
Yeah, he was hurting nobody but himself in that show.
So, in regards to repeat offenders, how does that compare to 50 years ago, 60 years ago?
I think that the judicial system was a whole lot, or I don't know if it's a judicial system or the solicitors that have changed. Solicitors now have so many people coming across their desk. It's like, see if this guy will plead, see if this guy will plead, see if this guy will plead, and they plead, for 6 months, and 7th month they're out there doing the same thing they were doing before. I think that has changed.
Well, I mean, the world's changed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Elaborate on that.
back to your Andy Griffith example. It's a TV show,
Right.
and he was a county sheriff in some backwater little town or county.
He was actually a city sheriff.
Yeah, he was city.
He was
Yeah,
the sheriff
for
of
Mayberry.
Mayberry.
I'm not a big Andy Griffith aficionado.
We obviously have generations on this podcast. So.
Well, that's good.
Hey, I know a good bit about Andy Griffith. I say he met he met him in person. I'm sure, didn't you, John?
No, not really. Well, I have met an impersonator.
An impersonator,
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, something to keep in mind though is it's a TV show.
right?
I mean, I've come from I have my law enforcement background, but my family has a background as well. And I know when my great grandpa was the sheriff of the county, he didn't have any deputies. He had, as the story went, he had two different hats. He'd be out working in the field or plowing or something, and if somebody came up with a problem, hold on, let me switch my hats. He'd switch his hat. Okay, what do you got?
Well, in there are certain counties, like in Georgia, like Gwinnett County, it's the Gwinnett County Police Department.
Right.
And the sheriff is there to handle the court, issuing summonses, all that kind of thing. And he has a limited staff. You know, he doesn't have somebody going out patrolling the county every day.
Well, that was a function of the county itself. They decided to have a police department. But if I understand and remember correctly, the authority to make arrests, to grant arrest powers, still lies with the sheriff.
Okay.
And he could at any point in time say, okay, Gwinnett County Police Department, you don't have arrest powers anymore. The sheriff's office is taking over. So it's something that, I mean, just like you look at the federal government, they've delegated powers down to the point they're trying to make it more manageable for everybody, but it's just they're delegating to where, like, for instance, you have
That's almost a step toward privatization, though, isn't it?
bureaucratization, whatever that word is.
Whatever, we'll make one.
I don't
up.
even- I don't
we
even
don't
know.
know one. We'll make it up.
That's it. I mean,
Mike,
it's
and Mikey can edit that.
Yeah.
it's bureaucracy because you have the legislature is supposed to make laws, that the executive branch is supposed to enforce them, but now they've delegated the power to got all these federal alphabet agencies that they decide what the rules are now. Back to your statement earlier about talking about rifles, AR-15s. The ATF decides what's legal and illegal now with policies and their own judgments. Whereas the way the system's set up, it should have been the legislature meeting to make those decisions. But they've delegated that authority down to people who, for better or worse, their job and their job security lies in making the rules as they see fit.
And that's what fills up the Supreme Court docket. It's because you've got all of these things that are being handled down at these lower levels that may or may not be constitutional.
Right.
And that's why they are always taken to court.
And who are they accountable to?
Exactly.
Well, one thing we haven't touched on yet, and I'm kind of surprised we haven't, but we've covered a lot of territory, is the actually weaponization of these agencies or groups or organizations.
Right.
And we could do a whole episode on that, so I don't know how far we take it today.
I say we just keep going, and like I said, I can cut and edit, and we can split it in episodes. And as long
Okay.
as Josh is here, so there's no dude wasting
I just
time.
saw you fix and turn it off.
All right. So one of the things that Johnny mentioned it, and I had it written down originally, and kind of erased it, not thinking that we were going to get to it. But I don't want to say it's the corruption of law enforcement, rather like you said, the weaponization of law enforcement to use against people to fit certain agendas.
So the real question is it a moral agenda, or is it a frivolous agenda? Is it a power grab?
Well,
What is it?
At one point, and we can look several years ago, like you said, law enforcement was almost weaponized, but here in the past few years, they've been demonized. You had the whole defund the police movement, and law enforcement was pretty much encouraged not to even go to
Well,
work.
Some groups, I'd agree with you. Other groups, I think, actually are trying to utilize their power and weaponize. So,
Well,
What's your experience, Josh? Because I know you've probably seen some of this stuff firsthand on either corruption or fighting corruption.
well, I mean, you just look at the attitudes of a lot of law enforcement officers now, a lot of agencies. You've almost kicked the stool out from under them. They have to go out every day, do their job, but also now they have commanding officers breathing down there. That's it. Yeah. They're having to make sure they do their job, but they look good doing their job, and they don't make anybody mad while they do their job. And it's
I used to volunteer firefighting, and then I served on a board of directors for a fire department after that. And it's the same way.
Right.
It doesn't matter what kind of public service you're in. You show up on a fire, you put too much water on it, the insurance company hollers. If you don't put enough water on it, the media says you didn't do anything. You can't win.
No.
I mean, so it's a constant struggle.
So has this always been the case where law enforcement or they started shifting from enforcing laws to enforcing social agendas?
We'll go
to
back
the point
to
where they still have to, do their job, as you say, protect the people, but also do it in a manner that doesn't get them sued or charged or whatever.
I'll tell you my
Which
thought on that.
eventually could be ineffective as law enforcement.
I definitely don't have Josh's experience, but my thoughts on that are that back in the day, I mean, they've always had an agenda. People's always used their power or position for whatever agenda they felt. But back in the day, we'd like to believe anyway, that we had people in those positions that we put in there because of their morality or because of their reputation or because of their social standing or whatever. They were a good person, quote unquote.
Yeah, sheriff. You elected that sheriff because
I think one of the things that's new today is we hire people for the different reasons. We hire people, one, because we're trying to find people to fill warm bodies in positions, but we also are looking for a different set of criteria than we looked at back in the day. And you can't be as subjective as you were back in the day. You've got to be more objective to keep from offending or raising liability of lawsuit or whatever.
So we hit on this point earlier. I think it would be interesting to kind of tie back into it. You said earlier when it comes to like elected officials, like sheriffs, you don't have to have any law enforcement experience.
You just got to win the election.
I think the trend has become, it doesn't take experience in any type of protection. It takes experience of being a social justice warrior. It's not about being effective in doing the job to enforce law. It's rather it's being effective in pushing this agenda into the legal system.
Well, look at the founding of the country versus where it's at now. Originally, legislators came into town, did their job, did their debates, passed the laws, went home. They lived with the people they represented.
Right.
They had a job. Their job was not professional politics and taking lobby money and that type of thing. They had a job and inconvenienced themselves to try to make the country better. Now you have people who move to Washington, get elected to the House of Representatives, stay there for an entire career between there and the Senate. They have a lobbying job or a private industry job related to one of the committees that they were on, waiting for them when they decide to retire. It's a total disconnect.
So, and I think
that's the case with all kind of careers.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Not just politics. I mean, take preachers.
Right.
So you could say the same thing about most country churches back in the day.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can get online and be ordained in
right.
some group or another in about 30 minutes.
I was ordained in 2017, I think, 2018. Okay. My brother was wanting to get married. He goes, "Man, will you officiate? For $60, I can."
It's just it's like the loosening of standards on everything. You know, you were saying earlier you don't have to have law enforcement experience to be a sheriff. Technically, you probably don't to be a police chief. I mean, it looks good on a resume before you're hired, but you don't have to be an attorney to be a judge in some places. You know, in counties under a certain population level, magistrate judge, probate judge, you You're just elected to it. Now, once you pass that threshold, you have to be an attorney, because when you go to traffic court in probate, they're going to have a case. I mean, they're going to have a trial. They're going to have a hearing on it, and you have to be a lawyer to know how to hold that hearing and know what the rules of evidence are. But like here in our area, you get elected to magistrate judge, probate judge job. You do the job, and if any sort of hearing does come up, or any sort of somebody decides to plead not guilty to the speeding ticket, it gets kicked to a court where there is an attorney serving as a judge. So
Let's
that's
go
kinda
back
scary.
let's go back to the bureaucracy that you brought up a few minutes ago. I think that's what's happening at least at the federal level is, you know, we change leadership in the White House at the very least every 8 years, sometimes every 4 years, and each time that we have a new president, he changes all of his cabinet. His cabinet members take their departments, they change all of their leadership. Go down to the next step, those individuals change their leadership, and by the time you get to the bottom, everybody that's in a state of leadership either owes somebody something, or has the same political views or ideology as the people at the top.
well, if you're talking about federal bureaucracy, it's housed in D.C. I think I saw something, and don't quote me on this, but the political division is 90-something%
One way.
yeah, one side. So when you have the career bureaucrat who they get hired at this alphabet soup agency, they're going to do a full career there. They're the ones that are interacting with the public. They're the ones who are making recommendations for policy. There's not that much changes. The name on the secretary of whatever will change. A lot of deputy secretary of this or that or the other changes, but the people who are in there are just dug in like ticks. Look at the legislature too. You have
Let me ask you this: the people that have made a career, say at the bottom, they've had to make a lot of changes over the years. If they've been in there through 4 or 5 changes,
Sorry.
yeah, we're talking about the people that have ingrained themselves into a career for 32, 36 years. Do you think that their point of view has changed, or they just go with the flow when they get to that level? Because the way management, and I have a little bit of experience with being managed.
A little.
When management changes, the way they want the business run changes, and I'm sure that happens in politics also. And I just wonder if those people are, you know, I'm here, I'll do whatever I'm told. It really doesn't matter, and when it gets to a certain point, I'll retire.
I think that's the best you can hope for, is somebody who's just going to keep their head down and do the job. It's when they have their own agenda that they'll try to slide in here and slide in there. That's where I think you start getting into issues.
Well, what if
The
their
ones
boss
that are going to train the new boss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's almost an occupational characteristic that you have to keep your head down and just kind of go with the tides if you want any sort of longevity.
Well, it would be a wishful thought that if things like that were developed from the bottom up, you know, the people with the experience, the people that are on the ground doing all the work, could influence their boss, and their boss could influence them, rather than every time the top changes, you know, it kind of trickles down and gets watered out.
I think all too often they try to satisfy their boss and then go do what they wanted to do anyway.
That's the way most of them do. That's correct.
At least in the private sector,
Right.
happens more than you realize.
So one of the points that I was kind of want to expand on is we've talked about it at least maybe 2 separate occasions already about how, when the country was founded, the leaders of the country were lawyers, they were farmers, they were individuals within the community. Well,
Contributors to society.
And then we keep talking about career politicians. Well, what changed? And I think it's people's finances. I think that the rich, those who have the money or have the family name, are the ones who get elected because they have the easiest marketing, or they have the most resources to marketing. It's hard to find good, moral, upright people to go into elections to, try to be elected as the leader of the country, or the leader of the state, or whatever, when they don't have the financial resources to put their name even in the pot. So,
well, I mean, look at the development of technology. Now, you don't have to go to each town to appeal to those voters that you're the best fit for this job. Yeah. Now you can stand in front of a camera. You got your makeup team ready and the press waiting outside to ask the questions.
It's no longer stump speeches. It's webcam speeches.
It's exactly right.
But it's more than that. We have this podcast, but I can guarantee you not everybody in the state of Georgia has listened to it. There's still so much.
What? Really?
There's still so much.
How can you guarantee that, Mikey?
I got the stats.
That's a question.
Are you sure those stats aren't manipulated?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Because I've only anyways. But when it comes to like the marketing of something, like if I wanted to run for president, I can go outside and shout it, and even put in the paperwork.
How old are you?
Not going to the logistics of it. Think about the marketing behind it.
In a few years, he could.
Yeah.
If he wanted to run for
but,
president.
I mean, the media's not going to cover some some kid who's trying to run for president.
But they might cover you exactly because of that.
Potentially.
I mean,
but it's more likely that you're gonna hear about the guy who's throwing the most money. You're gonna hear about the Trumps of the world he has his fortune before he even walked into office.
But now, how many that you've heard of lately made their fortune after they took office?
Oh my goodness, so many. That's one of the biggest issues that I have. And this is strictly political. It bothers me.
I think even those people were rich. They just got richer.
Right. Well,
right.
I mean,
no, it bothers me, and a lot of them is like book deals. Like while they're in office, they're more focused on their profits of their book deals or TV shows after they leave office than what they're doing at that time.
And that's only if they leave office.
I mean, look at the salaries of some of our government officials. I mean, I think I think the House of Representatives and Senate is what, $200,000 a year,
170 something thousand,
yeah.
I think, for the House of Representatives. But it's almost like an insider information scheme.
Trading.
Oh, yeah.
That's
exactly
the big thing that's going on now is insider trading.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know this for sure, but I think Pelosi got into some, maybe not trouble, but I think she had a lot of press on her about
somebody
that.
started a Twitter account tracking her family's investment, what they were doing, when they were investing, when they were divesting from different things. Twitter banned them.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, well, the people should at least know what to invest in.
Right.
That was before Elon Musk.
Right. But, I mean, that was seen as tampering with the market, and Twitter shut it down.
Yeah, and then you got the Bidens when it comes to going overseas and being members of a board that no experience in, just to get the profit of it, and a lot of that's probably name. So, but back to the point is, what can we do to get these moral and upright people into office? Is lack of motivation? Is it lack of finances? What is it that's making the career politicians be put in those positions? Is it just crappy election laws? What's preventing us from putting, like I said, true moral people into the government?
Fame and fortune goes a long way.
You say us putting them in there, they've got to want to be in there.
Right, so is it lack of motivation?
Most of the people who have the money to effectively run and are good people, they're too busy going out and running their ethical business, making tons of money. They don't have time for this.
That's why nobody believed Trump was running. They thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
Well,
why would he do that?
Yeah.
When you look at the availability of information now through technology, I don't have to go to the library anymore. I can answer any question with the little thing I carry around in my pocket. I have all the world's knowledge on me at all times, as long as the battery's charged. with that comes
along with all the world's fake news too.
That's exactly right. And you have to have some sort of ability
Balance,
to discern
yep.
what's what. But on that same note, when Mikey declares his candidacy for presidency, I hope you don't have skeletons, because all it takes is a couple of minutes typing away on my pocket computer that if there's skeletons in the closet, I can dig them out. No. People aren't willing to put themselves and their families through the ringer over a shot at trying to do the right thing. Like Johnny said, they're out there doing the right thing where they live.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now you'll find...
Well, another difference in that is a lot of us older folks, our information, things we did when we were younger, didn't get captured nearly as easily either.
Well, the internet's forever.
Right.
So, I was telling somebody about the Wayback Machine the other day.
Yeah.
And it's, if it's posted online, it's never gone. Just a quick aside, as a part of my investigation background, I was certified in cell phone technology and forensic data recovery. So I've spoken to a couple of civic groups, especially, and some younger audiences, and I've told them that, you don't put anything online, don't hit send with that picture you took unless you're willing to go show your family right then, because it's never going away.
Nope.
Yeah. One of my, there's a comedian, I'll listen to a lot of stand-up. If you listen to the podcast and all the previous episodes, I've mentioned comedians quite a lot. I listen to a lot of them. There's this one called Josh Wolf, and he talks a lot about his teenage son, and that's where most of his stand-up comes from. And he's talking about his teenage son is talking to him about his new iPad, and how his new iPad is the cloud for the house. And so the son's treating him like an idiot. It's like, oh yeah, I know what to do. I'll set it up for you. Don't worry, Dad. I got this. Starts setting it up. Well, one day he picks up his iPad and he's flicking through the pictures. He goes, "That's not mine." He goes, "Well, if that's what my wife thinks is attractive, you do whatever." He goes, "But wait, I know that desk. I built that desk. This is my son." Son didn't realize that every picture he took on his phone went straight to his dad. So he went in there and he goes, "So tell me about how the cloud works." He goes, "Oh, you're so stupid." So if mom takes a picture, it goes to the iPad. If my sister takes a picture, it goes to the iPad. If I and so how you doing? But yeah, it's exactly that. Nothing is truly private anymore unless it's anything with technology is hardly private anymore. So the moment you put it on the air, the internet or whatever, it's there forever. And yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have with kids nowadays, because kids at the age of 8 or 9 are now allowed to have iPads and iPhones and all this other stuff, and they're not mature enough to understand the true weight of that. And
But shouldn't we have always had that same moral lens, though? Now it's just technology has enabled you to get caught. I mean, we should have always had that.
Right. Well, I mean, and too many, to your point on kids running around with phones and tablets, when you start substituting parenting for, let me give them this device to babysit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of taking your responsibility, or giving up some of your responsibility and delegating it to some guy on the internet. And that's
one of the things Johnny said in an episode before is it's almost like our responsibility. I say our responsibility. It's almost like the responsibility of the parents to help kids develop a filter. And it's not necessarily a good thing to remove every bit of media or whatever away from your kids. Rather, it would be better to say, here's what's out there. Here's how you should react to it.
right.
And
I'd like to comment to that. All the information and disinformation that's out there, sometimes it takes a lot of common sense to figure out which ones you can count on, which ones you can't, which one's truth, which ones are fiction. Problem is that nobody has common sense anymore.
Common
not
sense.
common.
Yeah, that's it. It's uncommon sense at this point.
Well, one of the things that let's kind of go on this topic, and I'll try to tie it back into the legal system, is you're seeing a huge wave of this transgender movement, and a lot of kids who typically would have no business even thinking about it at the ages of 6, 7, 8 are now saying that they're the opposite gender or one of the 8,000 genders that's out there right now. And
Boy, there's a whole episode right there.
right. So it's that exposure and lack of parenting. They're using their tablets or whatever as a babysitter rather than parent their kids. Now these kids are growing up thinking that all this is real because they're impressionable at that age. But I'm going to tie this back into the legal system. Did you hear about the issue with Loudoun County, Virginia?
Yes.
Who hasn't?
John, have you heard about it? So, talking about pushing these like social issues, there's this high school student, middle school. It was high school.
It's high school.
There was a high school student, was a male student, claimed to be female, and the school system was trying to, I don't want to say appropriate. They're trying to be courteous to that student. Well, that student sexually assaulted a female in the school bathroom, and the school system tried to hide it. They basically said, "Oh, that never happened." Well, there was some investigating reporting done, and basically, I think everybody in that school system or the Board of Education was fired, or they resigned.
It's Loudoun County. I think there's probably a good number of them still there.
But long story short is, I mean, the governing body of that school system trying to push that social issue, I mean, that led to these girls getting hurt. And
whether they were pushing it or not, it happened on their watch. I mean,
Right,
they were either over tolerant or pushing it. But
And when the father came and confronted them about it, they had him arrested.
Right. And I think there's another instance by the same offender.
Yeah, I believe it happened. I think it happened on multiple occasions.
Yeah. But all that to the point of you have these people who are supposedly supposed to be protecting these constituents, but they're supposed to be protecting these people.
Well,
we put them in these positions.
That thing's going to continue to happen. That kind of thing continues to happen if there's no repercussion. There's no consequences. How many times have we talked about that on these episodes?
Now, there's a whole episode on consequences.
Right. I mean, what's deterring people from their behavior when we tolerate everything?
Well, I guess that ties to reform. What's the purpose of a jail? Is it a jail to reform citizens, or is it simply just trying to take people away from the civilian life?
Well, it depends on where you're at.
How so?
In the state of California, in Georgia, it's the Department of Corrections.
Mm-hmm.
In the state of California, I believe it's worded something along the lines of the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, or something with similar verbiage.
Fluffy.
Yes, very soft. And different, it gets back to people's and areas' political leanings and philosophies. What happens in your area is what you allow to happen in your area, or what you cause to happen. There's not any down the middle, calling balls and strikes as you see them. It's what the people in your area are either pushing or allowing to be pushed on them. So I feel like in that example with California, they were probably pushed toward that. The people, at least the people who had the authority to do so, made that the focus of the prison system. Whereas in Georgia, it's still the Department of Corrections. Their job is to house inmates, people who've committed crimes or been convicted of committing crimes. And then you're hoping that recidivism doesn't come back. You're hoping people learn that lesson while they're there and that they're not repeat offenders. If there's some reform on that person's part and they do better and they become better moral people, it's almost a byproduct. You hope for it, but you don't always count on it.
Thoughts?
Johnny, do you have anything to say?
Thanks for the question, John. I thought you'd never ask. I don't know. I need to see some statistics on that. I would love to know how effective plans are to rehabilitate. mean, is it a futile exercise or?
Well, just,
I'd like to see that too. You know, out of the 100,000 inmates that are in California, how many of those come out to be upstanding citizens when they
Leave the
Right.
leave the
when they
facility.
do their
Sentence.
when they do the time.
do the time?
Right. Well, I know that there's a big increase, I think it's pretty much nationwide nowadays, in diversion programs. They call them accountability courts, where you have a first-time drug offender who it's not a trafficking case or something like that. It's somebody's caught with a personal use amount or has an issue with substance abuse. They have these diversion programs where you apply and you're accepted to this drug court. The judge is empowered by Georgia legislature to almost treat you instead of punish you. You're required to get drug treatment. You're required to have a job. You're required to do all of these things. And if and when you complete this successfully, you don't have that drug conviction on your record. You don't have the scarlet letter that's keeping you from getting a job and being a productive member of society.
It gets expunged.
That's it.
Yeah.
And
I can
we have a good percentage of people who successfully complete it.
I was going to say, because a lot of, I know this is a big argument when it comes to prison reform. A lot of people who have like their first offenders on, a lower charge who go to jail, they learn or they get mixed in with their own people and they learn skills they should never really learn they start getting influenced.
It's definitely a problem.
Yeah, and then they come right back out into society and start committing crimes.
Instead of getting reformed, they get ingrained.
Right.
It's
They get
criminal university.
I mean, it's like, I'll tell
You might have
what,
went in over a theft charge, but while you're in there, you learn how to become a forger.
Yeah.
You learn how to rob a bank. You
I
learn
don't
how
know
to
if
do
I
these
don't know if they still do this. You may know. I can remember back when people would be convicted of petty crimes that were still punishable by a couple of years in prison. The judge giving them the option 2 years in prison or the Marines.
wow,
Yeah, and a lot of people took Marines at that time.
that's interesting.
I've actually heard a lot of people make a comment that took the military that if they hadn't have done that, they would have either been dead or still in prison.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think to some degree, unofficially, that still happens. But you also look at the military. Their standards, they just don't, they don't just want anybody, or it didn't until recently. They had a moral benchmark that they wanted met, as well as physical requirements and the ability to do an aptitude
Right.
to do things. But
Probably more so than policing.
it's so big that, and it's got, police work is police work.
Right.
Yeah, you've got investigators and traffic officers and SWAT teams. So you've got a pretty good little, a pretty diverse set of skills you can bring to the table. But the military's got truck drivers.
Yeah.
They've got cooks. They've got HVAC repairmen. It's the whole
Diesel
spectrum.
repairman.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you can be more accepting of a more diverse set of skills, but you still have to have that, or you still should have that benchmark.
I thought there for a minute you were going to say you can be all you can.
be all you can be.
I've started getting ads for Space Force lately on Facebook. It's like, what are the requirements for this?
So, as far as time goes, I think that one of the biggest criticisms we get, as far as is one of the biggest criticisms we get from our listeners, is we really need to have a point to drive home. We talked about the legal system, we talked about legislation, we talked about some politics and the jails or prisons, but talking directly to the audience, what's the point? What's the point of this topic? What can we learn from it? What can the audience take away and use today or tomorrow? Is there any point that we can make to help their lives, enrich their lives, or just educate them in a way or another?
I don't think that's what this podcast is really for. It's more to let people know what we think and to generate other thoughts.
Educate, broaden their minds.
Yeah.
Well, how about this? So instead of making a point for them to,
If I had a point I wanted to make though after hearing this podcast, it would be to get more involved. Don't sit on the sidelines. You hear what's changed, what's different. You've heard we've talked about some of the things that just happen because nobody else gets involved. Get involved. Voice your opinions.
Don't let bad elements get control of your local environment.
well, Josh, and I'm going to kind of throw this on you. There's some people who really have like strong negative opinions toward law enforcement. And then there's some who absolutely love law enforcement. Overall, if you were just talking to somebody about law enforcement, what would be the big caveats about law enforcement that you can help maybe clear some of the air for those who have those really strong opinions one way or the other?
Well, I mean, the strong opinions that's a reflection of society at large.
Right.
The extremes are being highlighted through the media and everything else. When you've got the people who just average everyday people who, yes, they support law enforcement and the idea of law enforcement, but they don't like what happened in this instance. You don't hear from them. You hear from the loud ones on the left, you hear from the loud ones on the right, and that's what gets highlighted. You've got, just like in society, just like in criminal defense and law enforcement, you've got the good, you've got a small pocket of bad. I think it's more a societal problem than it is just specific to any particular group. And
I think we need to listen. Well, John hit on this earlier. I think we need to use some critical thinking in everything that's presented to us, and again, get more involved and find out, before we form our opinions, is everything we're hearing true? Is everything we're hearing an extreme? Is everything we're hearing the average?
Well, and this goes for any research, but I think especially when it comes to what you see on TV as far as the extremes. If you get a lot on one side, go look at the other side.
Yep.
See what they're saying, because the truth is somewhere probably in the middle.
right. Well, I mean,
Right.
there's three stories.
Sides, yeah.
3 sides to every story.
That's exactly right. There's
Yeah.
3 sides to every story.
And I think as far as like a big takeaway is, when you hear these stories, definitely do your research on both ends. Make your own decision and don't let people make the decisions for you.
But when it comes to things you see on publicized about the criminal justice system or events that happen that reflect on law enforcement, you can't always get both sides. You can't always get all sides. You're getting the guy with the camera, the 10 guys, back to our earlier example, with cameras out filming. What's sensationalized by the for-profit press, and you shouldn't be getting anything from the defense because obviously,
They don't want to reveal their hand.
that's it. I mean, you can't.
Right.
And law enforcement shouldn't be releasing what they have in a perfect world until
The case
everything's
is settled.
complete. Yeah, until the truth has been dug out as best as they can through their investigation, through some sort of forensic approach, that just means you follow a process. Right. And once that's done, that information should be revealed, but it should be in court. It's when you have everything being sensationalized all the time that we start having these issues. Go ahead, I'm sorry. The number of officer-involved shootings is not higher than it ever was. If you'd believe that if you watching the news, it's lower. The numbers have been dropping for years. Now, there's been upticks recently in some certain circumstances, but it's all you see on TV.
I think in fact, I think the making it public, drawing attention to it, probably making it worse, because when you start demonizing the police, all you're doing is telling people don't listen to the police,
Right.
which leads to more.
Obviously see that.
Right.
But in general, the general trend of police brutality, officer-involved shootings, in custody deaths, they've been declining over the years. And it's not an insubstantial decline. But you'd never know it when you turn on the TV.
You have to dig deep to get those statistics.
Absolutely.
And that's a shame.
We don't have enough people digging deep enough on any topic these days.
Well, I mean, the FBI crime stats, they're released every year.
Right.
Now, they're a year behind, obviously. but they show that type of thing. They show all kinds of information.
Do you think that's something that some of the cable news networks would want to publicize?
It depends on what kind of ratings they would get from it, and their advertisers.
It depends on who
They're
their constituency
they're
is.
trends, but they're not sensational trends. I
Yeah.
mean,
It bleeds. If it bleeds, it leads. Back to that.
Yeah.
How do you fix that? Is there any way to fix that?
Mikey, when you run for president, I'll support you.
you put the right cabinet in, and they'll fix it.
Well, I mean, that's only going to last so long.
Well, but I mean, what is the right cabinet?
When you were fishing for a point a minute ago, I think one of the things you were fishing for, you're casting a net anyway for, was to get opinion of people in law enforcement. And I'll leave you on this note for that part of the point you're trying to make. And I apply this in the business world, not just in law enforcement or any other field. There's often positions in which I respect the position and usually the authority that goes with it. I may or may not respect the people that are holding that position, and that's up to their own. That's up to what they display themselves.
All righty. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up for the day. John, you have anything?
I'm good. It's a good conversation.
It was.
Josh,
Johnny?
Josh, glad to have you with us today.
Appreciate y'all having me on.
And Josh, any final words?
I think we pretty well covered it.
Yeah, beat a dead horse. I got it. All right. Well, thank you for listening to Modern Morality. Thank you for listening to Modern Morality. Please visit our website at modernmoralitymedia.com and leave us some feedback about the show. We look forward to exploring more with you. Until next time.